Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Ready for another journey through history. Today, we're diving into India's past, but through a really unique lens. The eyes of foreign travelers.
Oh, this is going to be
I
fascinating.
know, right? Especially if you're, say, a UPSC aspirant prepping for ancient and medieval Indian history. This is like gold.
Mhm.
Or, honestly, even if you're just a history buff like me, you're in for a treat.
I mean, who doesn't love a good travelogue?
Seriously. And we've got excerpts from a whole document packed with accounts from these travelers, folks who journeyed to India across, like, centuries.
Talk about a time machine. We're going to unpack their observations, their insights, all the juicy details.
Exactly. It's like having a cheat sheet to the past, but with this extra layer of trying to understand how these outsiders viewed India, which is a challenge in itself, right?
Absolutely. But it's in those different perspectives that we often find the most insightful nuggets. Their accounts can shed light on things that maybe local sources wouldn't even think to mention.
It's like getting a fresh pair of eyes on familiar ground. So are you ready to hit the road, so to speak?
Let's go. Time travel adventure. Here we come.
Awesome. First stop, understanding just how many different folks made their way to India. I mean, we're talking Greek scholars, Arab merchants, Chinese pilgrims, even European explorers way back when. The sheer variety is mind-blowing.
Right. It really shows how, even centuries ago, India was this crossroads of cultures and ideas.
It's like India was the original melting pot.
It's true. But let's not forget, these weren't exactly quick trips for a bit of sightseeing. These journeys were often long, arduous, sometimes even dangerous.
Yeah, no kidding. No hopping on a plane for a week-long getaway back then. So what were some of the driving forces behind these epic journeys?
Well, religion was a huge one. Think about Buddhist pilgrimages, for instance.
Hmm.
India, as the birthplace of Buddhism, held immense spiritual significance.
Like a holy grail for Buddhist pilgrims. Makes sense. What else?
Trade, of course. India was famous for its spices, textiles, precious stones, things that were highly sought after all over the world.
Ah, yes. Those Indian spices were worth their weight in gold back then.
Exactly. So merchants were naturally drawn to India, hoping to strike it rich. And then you had diplomacy, of course.
Right. Forming alliances, forging connections.
Exactly. Establishing relationships with powerful kingdoms, like those in India, was crucial for political and economic influence.
So these travelers were like the original global networkers, building bridges across continents.
Oh.
Fascinating. Let's dive into some specific examples. One name that pops up early on is Megasthenes.
Oh, yes, Megasthenes.
He was a Greek ambassador who visited the Mauryan court way back in the 3rd century BCE. His book, Indica, is like the go-to source for understanding that era. Some even call him the father of Indian history.
And for good reason. Indica provides incredible insights into the Mauryan Empire. He described the administrative structure, the social hierarchy, even how the military was organized. It's a goldmine of information.
It gives us this peek into a period that was, so pivotal in shaping ancient India.
Exactly. And what makes it even more valuable is that Megasthenes witnessed the Mauryan Empire at its absolute peak.
Right, under the rule of Emperor Ashoka, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. So his account captures this really important moment in time. Plus, it's interesting to consider the historical context, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Megasthenes visited India during the Hellenistic era, a time of incredible cultural exchange that followed Alexander the Great's conquests.
Ah, so we're seeing this fusion of Greek and Indian influences. That's got to be a fascinating blend.
It really is. The Hellenistic era opened up these new pathways for interaction between the East and West.
Like a cultural highway.
And Indica is a perfect example of the kind of knowledge that was being shared during this time.
It's not just some dry historical record, right?
Nope. It's full of these vivid descriptions of life in the Mauryan Empire, from the bustling cities to the royal court.
It really makes you wonder what it would have been like to be a fly on the wall back then.
Doesn't it?
Well, let's fast forward a few centuries. We encounter another fascinating figure, Xuanzang, a Chinese Buddhist monk who traveled to India in the 7th century CE.
Ah, yes, Xuanzang, a remarkable figure.
This guy spent 16 years, traveling and studying in India. Talk about dedication.
His journey was extraordinary. He was driven by this deep desire to learn about Buddhism in its birthplace, to trace its roots, so to speak.
So he was like an ancient Indiana Jones, but instead of searching for lost artifacts, he was on a quest for knowledge.
Exactly. He traveled extensively, visiting important Buddhist sites, studying with renowned scholars, collecting scriptures. His account is this treasure trove of information about the Gupta period, which is often seen as a golden age in Indian history.
The Golden Age, huh?
A time of great intellectual and artistic flourishing.
Wow, so his account must be essential reading for anyone interested in Buddhism in that era.
It's a must-read. He documented the different schools of Buddhist thought, the practices of monks and nuns, even the architecture of the monasteries. It paints a really detailed picture.
It's incredible how these travelers from totally different corners of the world and with such varied motivations ended up providing these invaluable glimpses into India's past.
Isn't it? Oh, we've only just scratched the surface. There are so many more fascinating travelers and their stories waiting to be explored. Oh yeah, there are tons. Ready for another time jump?
Hit me with it.
All right, let's zoom ahead to the 11th century. We meet this brilliant scholar named Al-Biruni.
Al-Biruni. Rings a bell.
He was from Central Asia, and his work, Taki Hind, is, well, it's considered a masterpiece of Indology.
Father of Indology, I think they call him, right?
Uh-huh.
That's a pretty impressive title. What makes his work so special?
I mean, the guy was a true polymath. Astronomy, mathematics, history, philosophy, you name it, he was into it.
A Renaissance man, but centuries earlier.
Exactly. And his Taki Hind, it really shows his curiosity and how meticulous he was as a scholar. He didn't just observe Indian society from afar, he really immersed himself, studied everything, religious texts, philosophical treatises, scientific advancements, social customs, you name it.
So he wasn't just here for the tourist attractions. He was on a mission to understand India on a much deeper level.
Oh, absolutely. And what's really remarkable is his objectivity. You see, a lot of foreign travelers, they viewed India through the lens of their own culture, their biases, you know.
I get it. It's hard to escape your own worldview sometimes.
Right. But Al-Biruni, he made a real effort to understand Indian ideas and practices within their own context, which is so rare even today. That's what makes his work incredibly valuable even now for anyone studying Indian history and culture.
It's like he was building a bridge between two different worlds, using knowledge as the foundation. I imagine his work is super helpful for UPSC aspirants, right? Especially those tackling ancient and medieval Indian history.
Oh, absolutely. To really grasp the nuances of India's past, you gotta understand Al-Biruni's perspective and the depth of his research. Okay, ready for someone a little more famous?
Lay it on me.
Let's talk about Marco Polo.
Ah, Marco Polo. Everyone's heard of him.
Right. But did you know that his travels actually brought him to southern India? 13th century, if you can believe it.
You know, I always associate Marco Polo with China.
Makes sense. That's the classic tale.
Yeah, but I guess it makes sense that he would have ended up in India too. I mean, given its importance in global trade back then.
Oh, absolutely. India was a major player on the world stage.
So what did Marco Polo have to say about his experiences in southern India?
Well, his account gives us a glimpse into a time when southern India was ruled by these powerful dynasties like the Pandyas and the Kakatiyas.
The Pandyas and the Kakatiyas, taking notes.
And he was super impressed by the trade, how thriving it was. He talks about these bustling ports, skilled artisans, and a flourishing pearl industry. It's quite a vivid picture.
So he was seeing a society that was dynamic and prosperous, really engaged in global commerce.
Exactly. And that's important because it challenges this, sometimes this image we get of a backward medieval world, especially from some European accounts.
It's a good reminder that there are always multiple sides to every story, or multiple perspectives, I guess you could say.
Precisely. Marco Polo's observations highlight how crucial it is to consider different viewpoints when we're studying history. Each traveler brings their own lens, their own biases, so comparing and contrasting accounts is key.
It's like putting together a puzzle, right?
Yeah.
You need all the pieces to see the full picture.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of different perspectives, it's fascinating to compare Marco Polo's account with that of Ibn Battuta.
Oh, Ibn Battuta,
Right.
Another legendary traveler.
Right. This Moroccan scholar traveled to India about a century after Marco Polo, during the time of the Delhi Sultanate.
His travels are legendary, like almost 30 years on the road, covering something like 75,000 miles. That's insane.
The ultimate road trip. And when he got to India, it was a time of major political shifts. The Delhi Sultanate was expanding its control across the subcontinent.
Wow, so he was witnessing history unfold firsthand.
He was right in the thick of it. And his account gives us these amazing insights into how the Delhi Sultanate operated, its administration, legal system, social customs, the whole 9 yards.
So now we're seeing India from two very different angles, right? From the bustling trade hubs of the south to the heart of the Delhi Sultanate in the north.
Exactly. And by studying these accounts side by side, we start to appreciate just how diverse and complex India's past really was.
It really is amazing the depth and breadth of information we get from these travelers. We've gone from the Mauryan Empire to the Delhi Sultanate, met scholars and pilgrims and merchants along the way. It's pretty clear India's always had this magnetic pull for people from all over.
Yeah, it's a testament to India's culture, how rich it is, and its place in global trade. Of course, that's been a constant. Plus the intellectual energy, always so dynamic. Each traveler, they came for their own reasons, but they all left with this deep sense of how complex and grand India is.
And their stories, they're so valuable for anyone trying to understand India's past, especially, for those UPSC aspirants digging deep into ancient and medieval Indian history.
Absolutely. These accounts, they're primary sources, the real deal. Speaking of which, our source material mentions a few European travelers who visited during the Mughal era. Now, that was a time of huge change with the Mughal Empire at its peak. I wonder what they observed.
Oh, I'm curious too. Powerful emperors, opulent palaces.
Yeah.
It must have been quite a sight.
Oh, definitely. One fascinating account comes from Jean-Baptiste Tavernier. He was a French gem merchant who made several trips to India in the 17th century.
A gem merchant during the Mughal era. Talk about being in the right place at the right time.
Right. And he was completely captivated by the Mughal court, the lavish lifestyle, the whole spectacle, gave these detailed descriptions of court ceremonies, the emperor's clothes, even the inner workings of the Mughal administration. Really fascinating stuff.
So he was seeing the Mughal Empire at its most dazzling, huh? Did he happen to mention anything about those famous Mughal diamonds? Being a gem merchant and all?
Oh, he did. In fact, Tavernier's account is famous for his description of the Koh-i-Noor diamond, one of the largest and most valuable diamonds in the world.
Wow, the Koh-i-Noor. To think he actually saw that legendary gem.
He described its size, the brilliance, the history, even traced its journey from the mines of Golconda to the Mughal treasury. It's quite a story.
I bet. His account must be a gold mine, so to speak, for anyone interested in gems and the Mughal Empire's opulence.
Absolutely. But it's also valuable for understanding the Mughal Empire's economy. He talks about bustling marketplaces, the trade routes that connected India with the world, and the role of European trading companies.
So it wasn't all emperors and palaces then?
No, not at all. The Mughal era was a time of intense economic activity, with India playing a crucial role in global trade networks.
Makes sense. Now, our source material also mentions another European traveler from this period, François Bernier, a French physician who spent quite a bit of time in India during the reign of Emperor Aurangzeb.
Ah, Bernier. His account offers a slightly different perspective, a bit more nuanced, sometimes even critical of the Mughal Empire.
Oh, how so?
Well, he acknowledged the grandeur of the court, the efficiency of the administration, but he also expressed some concerns about growing social inequalities and religious tensions under Aurangzeb.
So he was giving a more balanced view, not just focusing on the glitz and glamour.
Exactly, highlighting both the strengths and the weaknesses. And that's so important for anyone studying history, especially UPSC aspirants. It shows that even during these powerful, prosperous times, there were underlying challenges, complexities that can't be ignored.
It's a good reminder that history is never black and white, right? There are always shades of gray.
Exactly. Historical analysis is all about understanding those nuances, different viewpoints, the factors that contributed to the rise and fall of empires. Bernier, along with these other travelers, they help us put together a more complete, more accurate picture of the Mughal era.
And it reminds us that history isn't just about glorifying the past. It's about understanding the complexities, the challenges, the lessons we can learn from those who came before. Wrapping up this deep dive into the world of foreign travelers in India, I'm honestly just struck by how much information their accounts provide. And the variety? It's incredible.
It really speaks to how much India has fascinated the world throughout history. These travelers, all these different backgrounds, drawn to India for different reasons, but all leaving with a profound sense of its richness, diversity, complexity.
And their stories remind us that history isn't just facts and dates in a textbook. It's a tapestry, woven from the experiences and perspectives of real people, people who lived and traveled and observed the world around them.
Well said. By studying these accounts, we can gain a deeper understanding not just of India's past, but of how interconnected human history is, and the lasting power of cultural exchange.
Couldn't agree more. Well, thanks for joining us on this journey through time, everyone. We hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, given you some new insights, and maybe even inspired you to explore some of these fascinating accounts yourself.